Hello and welcome to the Print Dashboard, our fortnightly adda where we discuss the world of automobiles. But today we are going to go a bit off track into the world of motorsports. Why? Four-time Formula One champion Sebastian Vettel of the Aston Martin announced his retirement a few weeks ago. On Sunday, he had his last race. And his fourth and final championship victory came in India, in Greater Noida located Buddh International Circuit. Where is that circuit now, in the scheme of India's sports infrastructure? We have with us Kushan Mitra, our auto expert, who was recently there to talk about the state of affairs at BIC and Formula One in general. He'll also take us through what Vettel is and was for motorsports. Welcome, Kushan.
Thank you, Anurag. Yes, in fact, I was at the circuit this morning of Sunday, which was November 20th, racing an Audi RS5 and an Audi RSQ8 around the circuit. And it was very interesting to go walk past the Red Bull team building, which still has all the markings, and you still have Sebastian Vettel's helmet marked over there on top of the garages as well. It was very bizarre to see Seb race his final race. He was one of the most popular drivers on the grid. But it also reminded me, going to the circuit, what a huge waste, a colossal waste of money the circuit is. It just stands out like a sore thumb. You can see it from the Yamuna Expressway if you're driving past from Greater Noida towards Jewar. It just stands out, and while car makers like Audi and others do rent it out, as do some of us as automotive enthusiasts once in a while, publications and other jury rounds of many Car of the Year awards, it just doesn't get used at all. It was built at such a huge cost, about $200 million back in the mid-2000s actually. Yes, it's hosted its first race in 2010. And it just sticks out there like a sore thumb. It was supposed to be the centerpiece of this massive real estate project, and there are no buildings near it.
We keep complaining about sports infrastructure in this country, and BIC is one world-class example that India came up with.
Yes.
And then this state of affairs. But that's something we'll catch up on a bit later in the episode today. First, a bit about Vettel and where he stands in the grand scheme of things in the pantheon of F1. And I was reading your column where you mentioned that you were there at that race.
Yes, I was.
So take us back into the memory.
Oh, wow. I actually went for all three of the races hosted at the Buddh International Circuit. All three of those races were won by Sebastian Vettel. He stands tall in the pantheon. He won 4 consecutive drivers' championships. That's more than champion racers like Ayrton Senna. He's won it all. The last championship, the fourth and final championship, was a dominant year for Red Bull Racing, with echoes of the current year with Red Bull Racing's latest star, Max Verstappen. But what a race it was. And I remember, and you see this a lot, you see towards the end of the race at the BIC, the last and final Indian Grand Prix, which Seb won, he did donuts on the start-finish straight. And that
was 2013, right?
That was 2013. He got out of the car, then, he bowed to the car. It's quite famous, the pictures. It's been playing a lot on all the Formula One blogs and websites, and even Seb Vettel videos put out by all the broadcasters. So it was a tremendous race. But what I do also remember, that in the third race, it was very, very few people there. I mean, the first race, of course, back in 2011, was packed. It was packed to the rafters, and you had, of course, some people remember Metallica was supposed to play in Gurgaon and they didn't play, but that's a different story. But the first race was packed. The entire grandstand was filled. And by the second and definitely the third race, I think Delhi and even India had fallen a bit out of love with Formula One, so I don't think it was even 50% full. In Formula One, the race host, which over here was JP Associates, has to pay a certain license fee, so they only make money from ticket sales. And ticket sales are very limited in the final 2 years.
So, again, taking you back almost a decade, because you were there, and the world of F1 motorsports had descended on Indian soil. What was the general feedback about the infrastructure, BIC in particular? Because in a way, it was also a flagship sporting event for India.
It was.
And like you mentioned, that a lot of other countries use such events as some sort of a projection of their arrival in the motorsports.
Not just arrival.
Or just as a flagship event.
Oh yeah. Right now,
which becomes a pride for that country.
Formula One has definitely seen a massive revival in enthusiasm because of the Netflix series Drive to Survive. New races like the Saudi Grand Prix at Jeddah have been very popular, have been used by governments across the world, whether it's in Saudi Arabia, whether it's in Bahrain, whether it's in Qatar. Everywhere you want to have the race because these races get spoken about. The final race that actually took place of this season at Yas Marina at Abu Dhabi is a huge advertisement for the UAE. When we started our race over here, it was supposed to be a massive advertisement for India, but the sports minister at the time, it was the second UPA, government UPA 2, the sports minister at the time was MS Gill, the former election commissioner. He was very derisive about Formula One. He said motorsports isn't a sport, you just go around in circles and circles.
There was this debate of sports versus entertainment.
Yes.
That also...
Yes, sports versus entertainment actually became a tax issue because the government wanted to tax the Formula One race, but JP and the race organizers and even Formula One saying it's actually a sport and motorsports is a sport. The government did not consider motorsports a sport in the tax issue, and the income tax and entertainment tax authorities fought that. Let me assure you, as somebody just drove around 8 or 9 laps just on Sunday, driving around the circuit is not easy. And I'm talking about doing this in an Audi RS5, which is a very comfortable car. It's a very powerful car at 450 horsepower, but it's a comfortable car. Doing it in a cramped Formula One cabin or any open wheel racer, which is Formula 2 or Formula 4, it's not easy. In a proper racing car, it's extremely physically demanding because you're taking turns. You're going anti-clockwise, so it puts a lot of pressure on your neck. Your hands hurt because, as I said, the Saudi might have power steering. And you hurt when you brake hard because the seatbelt digs into you. Right. It's not easy racing. And I'm saying this, being in a comfy car, in a Formula One car isn't comfy. And you're worried about your life because you are going down that back straight at over 300 kilometers an hour. You are braking from 320 kilometers an hour to pretty much 50 kilometers an hour to take the turn 4, which is a very sharp right-hander. It's not easy at all. And so I don't see why it was. But I think at the time, motorsports in India was a very divided fraternity. There was no serious attempt made to convince authorities.
But Kushan, like you mentioned, the first race at the BIC was in 2011.
Yes.
Then it was 2012. Then it didn't stop there. We had the 2013 event as well. So for 3 years in a row, something that had seen continuous practice as far as a sporting calendar is concerned. After 3 years, I can understand if something happens once and then some problems come up. What explains this, that you do it for 3 years and then it sort of peters out?
I think the contract was for 3 years. That's what carried on for the first 3 years. After that, of course, also the promoters of the race, that is JP, got into a lot of trouble. homeowners in Greater Noida obviously are not happy because, Wishtown did not happen. The company fell into decline and actually went to insolvency. Not the final promoter, the JP Associates, but the promoters of the real estate project in and around the BIC. And the BIC was meant to be as the centerpiece of a real estate project.
Right.
It's going to be houses all around them, bungalows all over there. And even if you go there today, if you drive through the area, you can see land has been plotted out, but almost no construction taking place. It is still a good 40 kilometers from central Delhi. It might develop today because the new Jewar airport, the Greater Noida airport, is coming up not so far from there.
Do you also think the politics of that time
Yes,
also had an impact? There was an anti-graft movement going on in
Yes.
India in those years, and there was also a change of guard in Delhi. Do you think in that backdrop things didn't work out for
It didn't work out for multiple
the premier motorsporting event in India?
I think you're absolutely correct. One of the major reasons was that Mayawati was in charge in UP at those days. It was before the change of government at the center. But obviously by 2013, most of us had seen the light, or whatever you want to call it. The political winds blowing. We all kind of knew what's going to happen in 2014. And the entire race was considered very luxurious because, in the first year I went as a journalist, it's actually quite boring to go as a journalist to go to the race because you don't get to see the race. You actually have to go to a big room where there's huge screens and you go into the pits, you get to meet the drivers, you go into the team buildings, you in fact eat the same food as the team does. Some teams are better than others. Mercedes, which became champion 7 times round. So I remember chilling with Ralph Schumacher, that's Michael Schumacher's brother, who had the Mercedes before the race, having glasses of wine at 10 in the morning, and then you're seeing all the grid girls. Now grid girls are not there anymore in Formula One, but all the Airtel grid girls in the first race. But I didn't get to really enjoy the race. Second and third year I went part of the paddock club, which is much more luxurious, but it was a bit bizarre, right? You're there sipping champagne, getting nice gifts. F1 felt ostentatious at a time when India was complaining about draft, and we know if you remember the time, it didn't project the best image. I think the BIC can make a comeback, and next year it will actually host the International Racing Series again in the two-wheeler racing series called MotoGP.
Right.
A promoter in India has found, contacted Lorna, which is the rights holder for MotoGP. And let's see how that goes, even though MotoGP is not necessarily very popular in India as from even viewership, because it's not on any of the prime major broadcast networks. So let's see how that goes, and let's see if the BIC can make a return, because despite all the trouble the BIC's had, despite the trouble for the guys who build the infrastructure, JP, the circuit's been maintained very well. The surface of the BIC, as I said, I just drove on it, it's still very smooth. They worry about safety, all the safety norms are adhered to, so you have all the CCTV cameras, you have all the marshals over there.
But you did mention that bits of infra is creaking there.
Oh yes, definitely. The team buildings, the grandstands, if you drive through, you can see the grandstands, the seats are all bleached. 10 years of seats not being changed, the sunlight beating down in North India has taken its toll. The seats were all in the colors of the flag, which is, saffron, white and green. It's completely faded. The saffron and the green have also become white.
So Kushad, as you mentioned, it's coming back. Motorsport is coming back to BIC in the two-wheeler space. The MotoGP that you mentioned. So do you think the organizers they have done their homework? Is there a new renewed fan push in India, demand that would take care of the business of motorsport in India, or is it a new formula that's being devised?
I don't know. Or to be very honest, I don't see fan push for MotoGP. In fact, the announcement for MotoGP caught us, many of us in the automotive media profession, a bit by surprise. India is the world's largest motorcycle market, but a completely different type of motorcycle, right? 150 cc commuter motorcycles. We again don't have any Indian racer in MotoGP. Back in the day in Formula 1, you had Narayan Karthikeyan and Karun Chandok. Of course, it was very sad for Karun that he couldn't race. And you have some, even to this day, coming through in four-wheelers. In Formula 2, one of the top young drivers is a boy called Jehan Daruvala. He's a Zoroastrian boy from Mumbai. They're popular, but in MotoGP you have nobody. And I think for real popularity, there has to be a path to success in motorsport. And I think that is also epitomized by the BIC. We built this massive, top of the pyramid structure, whereas at the bottom of the pyramid, we don't have enough karting tracks. And, in Europe and America and South America and even Brazil, for example, why does Brazil provide so many great drivers? It's because you have karting tracks where kids are 5 or 6 years old.
So are you saying that in place of one big international motorsports infrastructure, India should have probably first gone for these smaller little blocks spread across the country?
Yeah, you could have gone.
Because I mean, if we look at any sport, the seeding, the introduction of any sport in any new culture is a very dynamic process.
Yes.
Infrastructure is one part of it. Television telecast is one part of it. Then franchisee, when they come in, that's one part of it. So it's like multiple attempts are made to make sure a sport takes its feet in any new arena, new society, new country.
You're seeing that with athletics and track and field. The government has put in so much money. The Sports Authority of India has put in so much money in promoting more track and field sports. I mean, Neeraj Chopra didn't just happen.
Right.
You built these great facilities across the country, all corners of our country. Similarly with motorsport, and as I said, it is a sport. You have to build small karting tracks around the country, and the government doesn't have. They can be commercial. Yes, motorsport is still an expensive sport, so it's not going to be. You don't expect somebody from lower income groups to come through. Most of the racers in motorsport, with the exception, I think, of Lewis Hamilton, multiple world champion, who came from a slightly, Lewis Hamilton's father had to work 2 jobs to do everything. We know the story. It's going to be expensive. So, the carts are expensive, all of that. But even then, you have to have some support. If even in Formula E, which is the electric racing series, where we actually have an Indian team in Mahindra, and Dilbagh, who's also this was his last year running the team, Dilbagh Gill. Mahindra's had some success in Formula E. We don't have an Indian driver in Formula E. I remember meeting Mr. Mahindra some time ago. I said, why don't you have an Indian driver? He wants to grow one. But it's bizarre that you have an Indian team but no Indian driver. And I don't think there is much hope for the Indian driver.
So in a way, BIC's status state today, we can be say that it set India's clock back vis-a-vis motorsports, introduction of motorsports in India.
I don't think it set India's clock back. I think,
because you had the highest form of, the most competitive format.
Yeah.
You got it a decade back. And today, you probably don't have anything.
I think I think there was a flaw in the thinking of the time. Many people argue, I'm sure in YP's podcast he can talk about that as well, about trickle-down economics. So there was a feeling that there will be trickle-down motorsport as well. You build a top circuit, and then smaller circuits will spring up. We'll do a small karting track over here, and there are actually fewer karting tracks. Of course, motorsport is developing. I mean, there are events happening. Volkswagen has played a role. They had the Polo Cup and the Vento Cup. And now I'm sure they're going to do something with their newer cars as well. Some companies have played a bigger role in this. As I said, Volkswagen. JK Tyre and MRF have both been huge supporters of motorsport. You have championship rally drivers in India as well. And big rallies are still held, I think, down south, particularly in Tamil Nadu, where you have two racetracks, smaller racetracks at the Madras Motor Speedway, which is opposite the Hyundai factory at Sriperumbudur, and the Kari International Speedway at Coimbatore. You have new tracks coming up near Pune. You have a street circuit coming up in Hyderabad, where Formula E will be hosted. And there's talk of tracks in Bengaluru as well. But tracks take a lot of land, and land is expensive in
Kushan,
India.
this is something that while I was reading up a bit about motorsport, this is something that came to me that world over, historically, if we see, motorsport is closely linked with auto manufacturing, automakers.
Yes.
There is a synchronization, and in India today, India has some of the biggest automakers, and we are exporting vehicles. Why do you think that culture escapes India?
It's not just India. I think we just don't have a culture of racing older cars. If you go to Europe, people race stock races, and they take old bangers, as they call them, cars that are 10, 12, 15 years old, and just race them. They modify the cars themselves. In many schools in the West, whether it's the US or Europe, or even Brazil for that matter, young kids learn how to tune cars in school. They taught how to repair cars in school. We don't have that car culture necessarily in India, other than some cities, particularly Mumbai, Pune, and Chennai. But it's sad. So we don't have that. And Maruti is India's largest car maker. It's done a lot for rallying back in the day. Back in the 80s and 90s, Maruti supported the Raid de Himalaya. They supported the Desert Storm Rally. But the Raid de Himalaya doesn't take place anymore for a very strange reason. As an organizer of the Raid de Himalaya told me recently, was we've actually built roads across the Himalayas now. Back in the day, you had little tracks. I've gone for a raid many, many years ago. As a younger kid, just watching it. I've gone for a Desert Storm, watching the rallies. But you see fewer of those as well. And even rallies, which I think could be much more popular in India, just haven't taken off. Because I don't know how you get younger people into car racing. I mean, many of my friends' children also play motorsports with video games, but even then, we don't even have a esports champion in car racing. So I don't know what car companies can do. Maybe they should, as they make more money, they should promote the sport a bit more.
Maybe we can hope this MotoGP event that's scheduled as of now next year can be the new, can be a point of new start. So
I think it can. I think even MotoGP, and particularly the two-wheeler market, is changing because you have a lot of new electric manufacturers coming in, and electric two-wheelers are becoming much more popular. So hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe it will spark a revolution and interest among kids in two-wheelers.
With that, we come to this episode of The Print Dashboard. Thank you, Kushan.
Thank you, Anurag.